Hey guys, tonight we will unveil a little-known facet of Jane Seymour Henry VIII's most cherished queen. The woman who replaced Anne Boleyn just days after her execution and gave birth to Prince Edward VI. The heir the entire court had longed for, but is the truth behind her gentle exterior really as pure as the rumors suggest? This story has been compiled from a wide array of historical sources, from ancient chronicles to modern scholarship, so please watch in full to help distinguish the fact from fiction. Since we are all part of a history-loving community, if you spot any inaccuracies or have a different perspective, don't hesitate to comment below so we can discuss together. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your local time zone. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Relax each fingertip. And listen to the tale of Jane Seymour, who would later become the most cherished queen of Henry VIII. Born with a name of great distinction, Jane Seymour, known in Middle English as Jahan Seymour, she entered the world on the gentle lands of Wiltshire, near Wolf Hall, which would forever carry the memory of a small but ambitious family. Her maternal grandfather, Sir John Wentworth, was a middling noble descended from the ancient Wentworth line of Yorkshire, where he had served the court under King Henry VII. Her maternal grandmother, Marjorie Wentworth, was renowned for her skill in the silk trade and for bridging the gap between townsfolk and aristocracy, thereby elevating the Seymour family's standing in London. From these two houses, Jane inherited a blend of gentle humility and noble bearing, a demeanour both aristocratic and warmly familiar. Like that of a country maiden, Jane's father, Sir John Seymour, was a knight devoted to the Tudor court. Having served under King Henry VII, he later joined the King's Council under Henry VIII. Overseeing the estates around Wiltshire, he was regarded as a paragon of duty and honour, a man who taught his children unwavering loyalty to the throne and respect for traditional values. Her mother, Marjorie Wentworth, daughter of the aforementioned grandparents, was celebrated for her gentle grace and diplomatic acumen, imparting to her descendants the refinements of language, poetry, and courtly etiquette. The Seymour household counted 4 children, of whom Jane was the 4th. Her siblings included 2 elder brothers, Edward Seymour and Thomas Seymour, and 1 elder sister, Elizabeth Seymour. Edward Seymour, distinguished by his tall stature and forthright spirit, would become Duke of Somerset and serve as Lord Protector when Prince Edward ascended the throne. Thomas Seymour, the youngest, was adventurous and ambitious, later seeking marriage to Princess Mary. Elizabeth Seymour, the middle child, led a quieter life, marrying a minor noble and serving as the family's letter writer. Positioned between 2 generations, one of assertive masculinity and the other of gentle femininity, Jane was the perfect balance, composed yet quietly strong. As for her education, Jane did not receive a university-level schooling like the highest nobility. Yet she became fluent in reading and writing both English and French. She acquired a working knowledge of poetry, the scriptures, and royal ceremony. Under her mother's guidance, she studied the essentials of English history, the geography of the shires, and courtly manners, while also learning needlework and embroidery to enhance her value as a lady-in-waiting. These lessons took place by warm candlelight in a rustic wooden chamber, where the rhythmic click of the sewing needle mingled with soft piano strains from a small harpsichord. Jane's childhood passed like a dream beneath the whispering canopy of the Wolf Hall gardens. She often sat by a wooden window frame, gazing at rose bushes in the dusk, listening to bird song like nature's own lullaby. Sometimes she and Elizabeth would wander among the herb beds, gathering sage leaves and orange blossoms to brew fragrant tea. The household servants adored Jane for her calm disposition, sharing scraps with dogs and cats, and gently enforcing order among her mischievous younger siblings. As a young maiden, Jane was frequently summoned to London to serve in the retinue of Queen Catherine of Aragon. This meant stepping into the splendours of courtly life, attending stage comedies, glittering candlelit banquets, elegant afternoon teas with nobles. Though not yet the centre of attention, Jane quietly observed, mastering the art of greeting, bowing, and speaking with gracious sincerity. The journey from modest lady-in-waiting to queen consort might have seemed a fanciful dream, yet, fortified by a stable family foundation, ample education, and a temperament both gentle and resolute, Jane Seymour stood ready for any challenge. From those peaceful days, seeds of ambition, intellect, and courage quietly took root, prepared to bloom in the fierce power struggles of the Tudor court. Now, with this brief portrait of her grandparents, parents, siblings, and education complete, can you sense the tranquil strength behind that serene gaze? Close your eyes for a moment, breathe deeply, and prepare to drift into the next chapter of this dramatic historical slumber. Jane Seymour first appeared at the English court around the year 1529. When the marriage between Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon was gradually unravelling due to their inability to produce a male heir. In the harsh Tudor world, obtaining a prince was not merely a private joy, but also the guarantee of a fragile dynasty's future after the storms of civil conflict. For that reason, Catherine of Aragon, despite sacrificing her youth, could not retain the king's hope, and Jane, then only a woman in her late 20s, suddenly became part of a grand power drama. When she first entered the royal household, Jane was merely a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine, chosen from the Seymour line that, though noble tracing back to King Edward III, had not yet reached the prominence of the Howard or Boleyn families. No one could have foreseen that a young woman of humble origins would one day stand proudly beside the throne. Thus, Jane stepped into court as a shadow, silently observing and suppressing every emotion so as not to draw the attention of petty schemers. From her very first days, Jane did not spark any love-at-first-sight sensations in the king. At that time, Henry remained enthralled by Anne Boleyn, the woman whose allure had driven him to break with the Roman Church to wed her in the year 1533. Rather than standing out like a brilliant rose, Jane chose to hide in the background. She watched Catherine and then Anne, noting every habit and gesture, so as to prepare herself for a slow but sure ascent. Jane's tact became evident when she swiftly transitioned from serving Catherine to serving Anne, without encountering hindrance. The Tudor palace was rife with tangled alliances and dark intrigue, yet Jane existed there with calm composure. She did not rush or boast, but quietly fulfilled her duties, steadily cultivating her knowledge of court rituals and etiquette, ready to seize the moment when opportunity eventually came. In the eyes of courtiers and those familiar with the court, Jane was described as the gentlest woman I ever knew. Her appeal did not stem from ostentatious beauty, but from serene poise and understanding eyes. While Anne Boleyn exuded strength and mystery, willing to challenge anyone who stood in her way, Jane was gentle as morning dew and soft as an autumn breeze. She earned the nickname Pacific, meaning the peacemaker, because whenever Jane appeared, the atmosphere would settle and soothe all tension. However, do not mistake gentleness for weakness. Beneath that elegant silk gown lay a keen intellect and a resilient survival instinct. Jane observed every conversation, memorized each glance, and carefully calculated every move. She knew that in the court, a single misstep could cost one's life or lead to exile. Therefore, Jane learned to be cautious without ever missing an opportunity. Over time, Jane gradually left a lasting imprint on the hearts of those in power. They sensed the hidden strength within her gentle exterior a strength that required no loud proclamation, but emanated from unwavering confidence. Courtiers whispered that if ever there were to be a queen who would not cause much uproar, it would be her. And that whisper, like a seed, quietly took root in Henry's mind. When Catherine was officially deposed and Anne began to lose the king's favour, Jane did not hesitate. She silently seized her chance. She did not kneel in supplication nor utter flowery words. Through her gentle gaze, devoted service, and absolute patience, Jane gradually became the perfect choice for queen. Her once overlooked presence now drew all eyes like a shining star. By late 1535, Henry began to take notice of Jane, though no one can say precisely when his attention first turned. Some whisper as early as 1534. The defining moment arrived with his autumn visit to Wolf Hall, the Seymour family seat. In the 10th month of that year, in that gentle countryside estate, amidst whispering willows and flickering hearth fires, a subtle change occurred. Jane, ever observant, saw Henry's carriage approach and felt the court's pulse shift. The same man who had once courted Anne Boleyn with fervent declarations now spared thoughtful glances for a quiet lady at the window. By the end of 1535 and into the opening days of 1536, Henry's affection for Jane became undeniable. Even Anne, though heavy with child, sensed a fracture in the royal bond as the king's gaze wandered. The court's corridors hummed with rumours the king's heart was drifting. Courtiers exchanged soft confidences, recalling how Jane carried herself with serene grace, like morning mist lingering on a silent meadow. Henry's infatuation grew gradually but steadily, as if drawn by an unseen current that gently but irresistibly pulled him toward Jane. On the 17th of February, in 1536, Jane's name surfaced for the first time in Ambassador Chappuis's dispatches, though he misspelled it as Seymour. The letter fluttered through court circles like a fragile dove, carrying news of forbidden longing. Before long, the gossip reached such a fevered pitch that Henry felt compelled to pen a private letter to Jane himself. In softly inked words, he addressed her as my beloved servant, promising to punish the slanderer responsible for the scurrilous pamphlet circulating among the courtiers. He ended with a yearning hope to embrace her soon in his arms. Meanwhile, Henry lavished Jane with countless luxurious gifts. He sent jewels that sparkled like captured starlight and necklaces, inlaid with his own portrait, a token of his deepening devotion. Among these treasures was a delicate locket, etched with his image, designed to rest close to her heart. Jane, with a knowing smile, once opened and closed that locket before Anne's eyes, subtly revealing the clandestine nature of their bond. The act was quiet yet charged, as though a single silk thread had been cut, unraveling a tapestry of jealousy and anger. Anne's reaction was immediate and fierce. In a burst of royal fury, she yanked the locket from Jane's neck with such force that the delicate chain snapped and her finger bled. The crimson droplet glistened on Jane's pale gown like a mournful petal. That vivid moment, Anne's trembling hand, Jane's composed gaze, Henry's hidden delight etched itself into courtly legend. It marked the beginning of a cascade of events that would lead to Anne's downfall. For anger and heartbreak are powerful weapons in the halls of power. Throughout these days of secret exchanges and ornate tokens, Jane maintained her calm exterior, as though walking in a dream. She did not boast of her triumph, nor did she flaunt Henry's letters. Instead, she tucked them away beneath her bodice, alongside memories of whispered promises and the soft cadence of the king's voice. In the quiet corners of Wolf Hall, or within the hushed chambers of Whitehall, Jane's measured patience carried her forward, each moment building toward a destiny she neither forced nor feared. By the time January of 1536 unfurled its pale dawns, Anne Boleyn's world was unraveling. The constant tension whispers of conspiracy. Flashes of the Queen's mounting fury built to a crescendo when she suffered a miscarriage. The loss came on the 29th of January, a devastating blow that extinguished the last flicker of hope for the longed-for male heir. Just weeks earlier, on the 7th of January, Catherine of Aragon had passed away, removing the thorny obstacle of a first marriage in Henry's path and legally clearing the way for him to wed again. In the hush of candlelit corridors and the muted murmur of the Privy Council, Jane Seymour and all who watched knew that Anne's days as queen were numbered. Court gossip wove a tapestry of whispers around Jane's role in Anne's downfall. Some claimed that Anne once stormed into a private chamber to find Jane serenely seated on Henry's lap, provoking a furious confrontation that echoed through the marble halls. Others spun tales of a clandestine wrestling match, where Anne and Jane grappled in a secret duel of rage and desperation. Ambassadeur Chapuis, with his keen eye for drama, recorded that Jane even refused a purse of gold and a sealed letter from the king's hand. He wrote that she knelt before the messenger and insisted, "I am a maiden of noble birth, steadfast in my honour, and I will not barter it for any treasure this world can offer." This show of virtuous restraint, an intentional test of Henry's intentions, only deepened his fascination and admiration for her. As spring stirred in the garden terraces of Westminster, the court moved with treacherous purpose. On the 2nd of May, a hush fell over the palace, as Anne and several of her closest allies were seized by guards. The next 2 weeks played out like a grim pageant, a staged trial on the 17th of May, where charges of treason and adultery were levelled against the Queen. Witnesses, some coerced, others eager for favour, spoke of alleged conspiracies and secret dalliances, their words echoing in the vaulted chambers like mournful psalms. Then, on the 19th of May, Anne Boleyn met her fate at the scaffold. The king, whose very heartbeat had once quickened for her, watched as the world she had known dissolved into tragedy. Yet as Anne's final breath mingled with the spring air, Jane Seymour's life unfolded in a markedly different direction. She was spirited away from the tumult, escorted to safe lodgings, and adorned in sumptuous gowns of velvet and jewels that caught the light like captured starlight. In those quiet rooms, Jane prepared for the role destiny had carved for her. Seamstresses draped her in fabrics of emerald and pearl, symbolizing both fertility and purity. Ladies in waiting adjusted the delicate folds of her sleeves and smoothed her dark hair, while courtiers laid out scrolls detailing the protocols of queenship. By candle glow, Jane practiced the poised nod and the gentle curtsy that would soon become her signature gestures before the assembled court. All the while, the city of London held its breath. Street vendors spoke of the quiet lady who had risen from anonymity to the cusp of power. Balladeers composed hushed verses about the seamstress turned queen, praising her patience and devotion. Even children in the alleyways recited bits of court gossip as if it were bedtime lore. In these days of transition, Jane moved with serene purpose. Her heart, accustomed to the steadied rhythm of Wolfhall's hearth, now matched the subtler tempo of royal expectation. She did not flaunt her triumph. Instead, she carried herself with soft confidence, as though walking through a dreamscape where every whisper and glance was part of a grand design. On the 20th of May in 1536, barely 24 hours after Anne's lifeless form had grown cold, Henry formally betrothed himself to Jane. The kingdom still reeled from recent turmoil, and an outbreak of plague had swept through the royal lodgings, delaying plans for a grand coronation. As a result, Jane would never receive the crown in the traditional ceremony of regalia. Yet this did little to diminish her scent. The bond of marriage was sealed. The wedding took place on the 30th of May at Whitehall Palace, a quiet affair cloaked in both reverence and relief. 10 days later, the king and his new consort made their first public appearance together, greeting the populace from the palace balcony. Before them stood a queen whose gentle countenance and unassuming grace delighted onlookers. Gone was the sharp edge of scandal that once accompanied Anne. Instead, Jane's serene smile suggested a gentle era dawning after months of unrest. At the Grand Wit and Wisdom Festival, a celebration of courtly learning and merriment, Jane stood by Henry's side, wearing the emblem of her devotion, a delicate brooch inscribed with the words, "Bound to obey and serve." The motto felt like a soothing balm compared to Anne's defiant creed, "This is the will, let them grumble." And it offered a stark contrast in royal philosophy, where Anne had wielded her power with spirited resolve. Jane embraced her role with humble dedication, a posture that endeared her instantly to the hearts of a weary people. In the weeks that followed, Henry bestowed upon his new queen vast holdings, 104 manors stretching across 4 counties, interspersed with dense woodlands and rolling pastures. The lands, once scattered among lesser nobles, now lay under Jane's stewardship. She accepted these gifts with quiet gratitude, fully aware that her greatest duty was not to amass wealth, but to fulfill the crown's most urgent need, providing a male heir. True to the weight of expectation, Jane soon discovered she was with child. The court buzzed with hopeful whispers at last. The Tudor lineage would secure its future, yet fate intervened cruelly. As Jane suffered a miscarriage in the spring, news of her loss spread swiftly. Like petals falling from a wounded rose, the queen retreated into seclusion, attended by gentle physicians who applied soothing poultices and whispered words of comfort beneath flickering lamps. Though grief lay heavy in her heart, Jane's resolve remained unbroken. In those hushed days, she often gazed at the faint glow of candlelight upon her chamber walls, her fingers tracing the soft new embroidery on her gowns, a subtle tapestry of lilies and thistles, symbols of purity and perseverance. Through tears and quiet prayers, Jane found strength in the promise she had made to the king and to the realm. She would not falter, for she carried within her womb the fragile thread connecting Tudor blood to future kingship. Time passed in gentle persistence. By midsummer, Jane felt life stirring once more. With renewed hope, she announced her second pregnancy. Courtiers rejoiced, sending garlands of white roses and sweetmeats to mark the occasion. The castle kitchens prepared nourishing broths of barley and almond, deemed safe and strengthening for the delicate state of motherhood. Even the royal falcons, once silent, were heard crying aloft in the courtyard if heralding the news. Jane understood that the forthcoming months would test her very spirit. The road to childbirth in the Tudor age was fraught with peril, an age where midwives wielded herbs and prayers with equal fervour, and where a simple fever could turn the throne's aspirations to dust. Yet Jane approached each sunrise with gentle determination. She spent hours in the palace gardens, strolling among ripening herbs, inhaling the faint scent of lavender and chamomile to calm her mind. In the afternoons, she rested upon cushioned settees, listening to the distant strains of lute music drifting through open windows. As autumn's breath began to cool the air, Jane's condition deepened into the final stages of expectancy. She withdrew further from public duties, draping herself in soft velvets of pale green, a nod to spring's renewal and the life she carried. Doctors monitored her closely, noting her health with reverent care, while attendants fluffed pillows beneath her back and arranged bowls of rosewater to stave off morning sickness. Jane accepted their ministrations with soft-spoken gratitude. Her calm presence, a testament to the quiet fortitude that had brought her this far. In the hush before nightfall, Jane would sometimes whisper to the unborn child, her voice a soothing lullaby, "Rest now, my little one, for the hour will come when you will enter this world." She imagined the child's small hands and the king's delight at seeing his long-sought son at last. Though weariness tugged at her bones, Jane's spirit remained tethered to hope. Thus, in the waning days of 1536, the Tudor court awaited its most perilous and momentous event, the birth of a prince who would carry Jane Seymour's legacy forward. The halls of Whitehall, once echoing with controversy and grief, now held a hushed anticipation. As gentle as a mother's heartbeat in the soft glow of candlelight, and Jane, The Queen, who had emerged from shadows with quiet grace, prepared to face the greatest challenge of all. By mid-1537, Jane entered her second pregnancy. At the king's command, she withdrew from all public duties and lived in near-total seclusion until September, when she was finally confined wholly to her private chambers. Her pale, almost translucent complexion, considered the height of Tudor beauty, betrayed a possible anemia, a lack of iron that placed her at grave risk when the hour of childbirth approached. As October's chill crept into the halls of Whitehall, the labour began under ominous circumstances. The baby lay in a breech position, turned the wrong way for an easy delivery. The Queen endured relentless contractions for 2 days and 3 nights, each wave more agonizing than the last. Midwives and physicians hovered anxiously, exchanging hushed worries that only one life might be saved, either the crown's long-awaited prince or the Queen himself. In that darkened room, legend says, Henry's voice rang out cold and unyielding. "If but one can live, let the prince live. For kings may wed again." Such words laid bare the brutal reality of a feudal court and the precarious status of a woman in a world ruled by lineage and power. At 2 o'clock on the morning of the 12th of October in 1537, after hours of fierce struggle, Jane Seymour delivered a boy, Edward Tudor, the fruit of the king's fervent hopes. The palace erupted in muted celebration. Trumpets sounded in distant chambers. And gentle prayers drifted through candlelit corridors. For a moment, Jane's health appeared steadfast. She even signed letters and received a few quiet visitors later that very day. Yet the fragile reprieve was short-lived. Within days, Jane fell ill again, stricken by what was termed a flux, a sudden and violent ailment that modern scholars suspect was postpartum hemorrhage or severe infection. 16th century medicine, lacking both antiseptics and detailed understanding of blood loss, offered little remedy beyond herbal poultices and cold compresses. Each passing hour saw Jane's strength ebb like the tide, and by the 24th of October, the gentle Queen, just 29 years old, breathed her last. Her death came but 9 months after her anointment as Queen. Yet those months were filled with the gravest drama of the Tudor saga. As Jane slipped away in the silent hush of dawn, the court felt a collective shiver of loss. King Henry, upon hearing of her passing, is said to have wept with genuine sorrow, donning black for 3 months longer than for any other of his 7 marriages. The Queen's funeral at Windsor Castle on the 12th of November was a solemn spectacle. 29 mourners, a number matching her years, flanked the bier as her body was laid to rest. Princess Mary, Catherine's daughter, who had once been served by Jane, stood as chief mourner, a poignant symbol of the fragile bonds between wives in Henry's tumultuous life. The procession's candlelight flickered in the chapels, casting shadows that seemed to dance with memories of Jane's quiet resolve. Thus ended the brief yet luminous chapter of Jane Seymour's life. In just 9 short months, she had carried the Tudor line forward, embraced the crown's highest duties, and faced death with a grace that would echo through history. As the court moved on, preparing for the next queen and the next struggle, Jane's silent legacy endured in the newborn prince who would one day reign as Edward VI. In the soft hush of that final dawn, the Tudor world witnessed both the triumph of hope and the heartbreak of loss, wrapped together in the fragile life of a queen whose gentle spirit had momentarily tamed a king's restless heart. After delivering Prince Edward, Jane continued her duties with remarkable composure. On the evening of October 12th, she was able to sign letters and receive a handful of trusted visitors at her bedside, conversing in soft tones that filled the candlelit chamber. Again on the 15th, she welcomed another small gathering, ladies-in-waiting and gentle physicians smiling as they offered her warm broth and reassurances. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though the worst had passed, and Jane might yet recover her strength. However, on the morning of October 16th, Jane began to exhibit troubling signs of what court physicians called the flux. Her attendants noted sudden weakness, clammy skin, and relentless cramps. Some suspected acute postpartum hemorrhage. Others believed it was severe gastrointestinal distress, perhaps brought on by weakened digestion and contaminated food. In that era, 16th century medicine offered no antibiotics, no blood transfusions, no surgical measures to staunch bleeding. Instead, midwives and physicians resorted to time-worn folk remedies, herbal poultices of yarrow and comfrey, cold compresses, and frequent bandage changes, hoping to staunch the flow of blood and the tide of infection. As word of Jane's plight spread, lurid rumours began to swirl through the court and beyond. Whispered tales claimed that, in his desperate yearning for a male heir, King Henry had ordered an abdominal incision while Jane was still conscious, a cruel procedure that, absent modern anaesthesia or antiseptics, would have amounted to a death sentence. Though no reliable record confirms this horrifying measure, the story resonated with a public already wary of Tudor ruthlessness. It painted a picture of a feudal regime willing to sacrifice a queen's life to secure dynastic continuity, and it stirred both shock and sympathy for Jane among the people. Yet the most trustworthy accounts from Jane's own time tell a different story. Contemporary letters and the official court chronicle recorded that Jane fell victim to a sudden chill and an inability to keep down food, symptoms consistent with severe colds or possibly food poisoning. In the days following her labour, the Queen's extremities became cold to the touch, and her breathing grew laboured. With no firm diagnostic tools, her attendants could only observe and pray, applying cooling methods and perfumed linens to comfort her. Centuries later, historian Alison Weir analysed these events and proposed a more precise explanation. Jane may have suffered a thromboembolic event when a blood clot formed, perhaps during the prolonged labour, travelled from her heart to her brain or lungs. Such an embolism could explain the sudden collapse, the laboured breathing, and the swift progression from moderate discomfort to critical condition. Even this hypothesis, grounded in 21st century medical knowledge, cannot be tested against the sparse records of Tudor medicine. Nonetheless, it underscores how precarious childbirth was in an age before germ theory and circulatory science. Regardless of the precise cause, hemorrhage, infection, embolism, or a combination thereof, Jane's decline illustrated the brutal limits of her era's healing arts. Over days, her strength ebbed like a receding tide. Attendants maintained vigil, tidying her white linen gowns, offering sips of rosewater, and chanting prayers for her recovery. The palace corridors, once filled with hushed congratulations on the prince's safe arrival, now echoed with the soft footfalls of mourners. Each passager qui est l'amant. On the dawn of October 24th, Jane breathed her last. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the gentle queen who had endured so much slipped quietly away at the age of 29. The chamber was hushed, the fire's embers dying down, as if the very walls mourned her passing. News of her death reached King Henry with a weight that modern observers can barely fathom. Contemporaries said he wept openly. His grief, a rare public display for a monarch famed for his stern resolve. In the aftermath, the court observed a solemn hush. Jane's demise was a stark reminder of the mortal cost of dynastic ambition and the fragility of women's lives in childbirth. Her death certificate, if one might call it that, would have listed no clear cause beyond flux or sudden disease, leaving later generations to piece together the fragments of evidence. Yet even the most clinical analysis cannot erase the poignancy of a queen who, in a single lifetime, had embodied both the promise of renewal and the hazards of power. Thus, Jane Seymour's final days stand as a testament to the harsh realities of Tudor medicine and the perilous journey of motherhood. In the glow of flickering candles and beneath the weight of royal expectation, she met her end with the same quiet dignity that marked her ascent. And in her passing, the the court found itself forever altered. Bound by the memory of a young queen whose gentle spirit briefly illuminated the often cruel landscape of 16th century England. At 2 o'clock on the morning of October 24th in 1537, Jane Seymour drew her final breath within the quiet walls of the Tudor court. The hush that followed seemed to settle like gentle snowfall upon the hushed corridors of the palace. Word of the Queen's passing spread swiftly, and the machinery of royal ceremony sprang into solemn motion. Preparations for her funeral began at once, each detail carried out with measured reverence. On the 12th of November, the grand ceremony was held at Windsor Castle. The grey November sky lent a muted light to the ancient stones, and trumpets and kettle drums sounded in deep, mournful tones that echoed through the grounds. Candles flickered in the chill air, their flames dancing like tiny spirits of remembrance. Behind the hearse, a procession of 29 mourners walked in stately silence, each figure representing 1 year of Jane's all-too-brief life. Their footsteps formed a rhythmic drumbeat of loss, marking time both forward and back, as they carried her toward the vault that would hold her earthly remains. Perhaps the most poignant sight of the day was little Princess Mary, daughter of Catherine of Aragon, and once served by Jane as a lady-in-waiting, clad in modest mourning robes. The princess served as chief mourner, her tear-streaked face illuminated by the soft glow of torchlight. There she stood by the catafalque, hands clasped in sorrow, embodying a bond that transcended politics and bloodlines, the quiet solidarity of two women bound by service to a king's ever-shifting affections. Mary's gentle grief spoke volumes of respect, for in that tearful vigil, she honoured not only a queen, but a sister in womanhood. King Henry, who had long cultivated an image of stern resolve, surprised many with the depth of his sorrow. Instead of seeking solace in new alliances or turning his court's attention elsewhere, he cloaked himself in mourning. For 3 months, an unparalleled period of royal bereavement, he wore the weight of black above his ornate doublets and gowns. Portraits later would hint at his gaunt cheeks and downcast eyes. As though the loss had hollowed him from within, he postponed all plans for remarriage, a decision that held for 2 full years, allowing his heart to navigate the strange currents of genuine grief. During those months of mourning, Henry's courtiers noted changes in his very bearing. His robust frame, once a symbol of kingly vigour, began to soften under the pressure of sadness and indulgence in richer foods, perhaps a futile attempt to fill the void left by Jane's absence. His physical health waned, gout and fever flares interrupted his courtly routines, and his famed appetite flagged. Letters written in his hand revealed uneven script and tremors, subtle clues to an inner turmoil that no crown could soothe. Historians have since reflected on this period as the one time Henry truly experienced the raw pang of loss. Stripped of the distractions of power plays and matrimonial ambition, he confronted mortality in its starkest form. The court, too, felt this shift. Feasting halls grew quieter, and even the royal falcons seemed to call less often, as though nature itself sensed a void at the heart of the realm. Under the shadow of black banners, the people whispered that for once, the king's desires were not for conquest or heirs, but for the echo of a gentle voice that had slipped into memory. And so, in the year following Jane Seymour's death, the Tudor court moved in a solemn dance between past love and future uncertainty. Her funeral rites at Windsor remained a touchstone of collective mourning, a reminder that even in an age ruled by lineage and power, the fragile threads of human affection could bring a mighty king to his knees. In the lingering hush of that winter, Henry's world felt the tremor of a queen's absence, a tremor that would shape his reign and remind all who watched that grief, like hope, can alter the course of history. Although she reigned as queen for less than 2 years, Jane Seymour left a legacy both deep and enduring. Politically, she had secured the Tudor succession by bearing the future monarch Edward VI, thus cementing the dynasty's fragile hold on the realm. In a court rife with intrigue and sudden falls from favour, the birth of a male heir was nothing short of a miracle, and historians credit Jane's calm persistence for saving the Tudor line from collapse. Culturally, Jane's gentle presence and reputation for compassion reshaped the image of royalty itself. In contrast to the sharp tongues and folded accusations of Anne Boleyn's tenure, Jane became the living embodiment of feminine virtue, an icon of women's chastity amid a court known more for power struggles than for mercy. Noble women and commoners alike spoke of her in reverent tones, marveling at a queen who seemed to bring comfort rather than command, who soothed wounds instead of inflicting them. One of Jane's most lasting reforms concerned the conduct of the royal household. She instituted strict new rules for the ladies-in-waiting. Each was to maintain personal honour, devote herself to pious service of God, and adhere to the elaborate ceremonies of court with utmost decorum. Gone were the days of clandestine trysts and whispered rivalries in the corridors under Jane's guidance. The hearth at Whitehall burned for prayer and decorous conversation. This regimen not only bolstered the image of the crown as sanctified and pure, but also checked the scandalous rumours that had once swirled around the Queen's inner circle. Beyond the marble halls and gilded chambers, Jane's virtues seeped into popular culture. Minstrels composed a ballad titled "The King's Tranquil," celebrating her deft grace, patient endurance, and heartfelt devotion. The song's refrain, soft as dawn, steadfast as steel. The Queen who calmed our king's great zeal echoed through taverns and manor houses alike. Mothers sang it to children at bedtime. Scribes penned its verses in illuminated manuscripts. Even birds seemed to carry its gentle melody in the dawn wind. In the decades that followed, Jane's image endured in art and literature as a touchstone of kindness in a merciless age. Portraits depicted her with a serene countenance, hands folded in prayer, halos of pearl embroidery framing her pale face. Playwrights wrote scenes of courtly compassion, where Jane bestowed bread and comfort upon the poor. Calm amid the court's restless turmoil, in chorded ballads and stage tales, she remained the Queen of Peace, a fragile flame of mercy, flickering in the dark corridors of power. Theatres in London staged pageants that contrasted Jane's virtue with the fierce ambition of her predecessor. Poets invoked her memory as they explored themes of sacrifice and strength, how a woman's gentle will could wield a more enduring power than steel. Across the centuries, novelists and screenwriters have revisited her story time and again, each interpretation accentuating the quiet courage she displayed in a world where queens were expected to be either pawns or predators. Even the Tudor chapels, in their flickering candlelight, kept her memory alive. Choirs sang "The King's Tranquil" during evening prayers, weaving her name into the liturgy as a guardian of faith and duty. Visitors to Windsor Castle would pause at her tomb in St. George's Chapel, laying ribbons of white silk upon the stone slab, as an offering of gratitude for her brief but brilliant reign. In modern times, scholars have re-examined Jane's influence on the role of queenship. They note how her emphasis on piety, charity, and ceremonial order foreshadowed later shifts in royal behaviour when monarchs would present themselves as shepherds of their people rather than tyrants over them. Jane's approach also influenced the etiquette manuals of Europe, inspiring guidelines on courtly conduct that lasted well into the 17th century. Yet for all the pomp and chronicled ceremonies, Jane Seymour's most vital gift remains the child she bore. Edward VI's brief reign continued his mother's legacy of reform. Under his regency, the country saw the consolidation of Protestant reforms and charitable works that echoed Jane's own concerns for the vulnerable. Though the prince's life was cut short, historians often point back to Jane's commitment to the greater good as the seed from which his more enlightened young court would grow. And so, as candlelight flickers upon the vaulted ceilings of Tudor chapels, and the strains of The King's Tranquil drift through memory's corridors, we remember Jane Seymour not as a footnote to tragedy, but as a figure of solace and steadfastness. In a royal tapestry threaded with ambition and sorrow, Her strand gleams with compassion, an enduring testament to the power of gentleness in a world forever drawn to the clang of steel. Prince Edward's arrival into the world was greeted with a shower of praise that seemed to wash away the sorrows of years past. From candlelit council chambers to bustling market squares, the word spread that the Tudor line was secured at last. Little Edward, cradled in swaddling cloths of green and gold, became the living symbol of hope for a realm weary of dynastic uncertainty. Though Jane Seymour would not live to see her son ascend the throne, her gift of the breath of life was celebrated by both nobility and commoner alike. After Henry VIII's death in 1547, Edward, barely 10 years old, was proclaimed king. The young monarch's regency fell to his half-sister, the Dowager Queen Catherine Parr, whose gentle guidance matched the maternal care Jane had once shown. Alongside Catherine, Edward Seymour, Jane's own brother, now Duke of Somerset, assumed the role of Lord Protector. He governed in Edward's name, steering the realm through cautious reforms and delicate alliances. Under their watch, the kingdom seemed on the verge of a new dawn, one shaped by the seeds Jane had sown. Jane's influence on her son's reign was unmistakable. During those first fragile years, her memory served as a guiding star for policy and piety. Somerset and Catherine often invoked Jane's virtues, her devotion to duty, her humility before God, and her steadfast pursuit of order to justify measures aimed at strengthening royal authority and calming religious strife. The Queen, who had ruled briefly yet brightly, now guided the realm in absence. As if her spirit lingered in corridors of power and the hallowed aisles of court chapels, religious reforms surged forward under Edward VI. The Church of England, once Henry's reluctant offspring, now distanced itself more decisively from Roman influence. Mass was delivered in English rather than Latin. Vestments and altars were simplified, and sermons replaced elaborate ritual. While some viewed these changes as radical, they mirrored Jane's own unassuming devotion, favouring heartfelt worship over intricate ceremony. In many parish churches, congregations lowered their heads in prayer to wooden crosses rather than golden icons. A quiet revolution, echoing the Queen, who had prized sincerity over spectacle. Political reforms followed in tandem. Laws were enacted to secure male inheritance rights more firmly, ensuring that Edward's position could not be so easily contested. Acts of Parliament clarified primogeniture, limiting the ambiguities that had plagued Henry's quest for an heir. These statutes, though technical, carried the weight of Jane's sacrifice without her. Edward would never have existed to wear the crown at all. Peers and commoners alike saw these legal tightenings as a tribute to the mother whose short reign had so dramatically altered Tudor fortunes. Throughout Edward's minority, Jane's name appeared in many a proclamation and sermon. Court preachers often reminded listeners that the king's health, education, and capacity to rule owed itself to his mother's courage. In the royal chapel, an embroidered banner bore her emblem. Two lilies entwined, a symbol of purity and resilience. Ach Sunday, as nobles lined the choir stalls. Their prayers included a silent nod to Jane's compassion, beseeching divine favour for the young sovereign she had brought into being. Beyond legislation and liturgy, the Queen's legacy took root in charity. Somerset's administration established poor relief systems that matched Jane's own concern for the vulnerable. Almshouses sprang up near town gates, offering shelter and soup to aged labourers. Endowments funded apprenticeships for fatherless sons, recalling Jane's nurturing spirit. When the harvest failed and grain prices rose, the Protector ordered emergency distributions, actions framed as continuations of the Queen's unspoken vow to serve the needy. Within noble households, Jane's model of courtly conduct endured. Ladies-in-waiting at Edward's court still recited the etiquette she had instituted, from silent prayers at dawn to discreet acts of kindness towards servants. Tutors instructed pages and gentlewomen in the arts of needlework and scripture, echoing lessons Jane once absorbed under her mother's tutelage. Even ambassadors arriving from foreign lands noted the decorum of Edward's court, contrasting it with the more flamboyant assemblies elsewhere in Europe. Literature and the arts also responded to Jane's memory. Poets composed elegies in her honor, often comparing her to mythical queens of mercy. Playwrights staged allegories of a queen of peace who tamed the wild beast of discord with a gentle hand. Painters captured her likeness in posthumous portraits, always with a reserved smile and soft gaze, an image that underscored the kingdom's gratitude for her brief, luminous reign. By the time Edward VI reached his teens, the realm had transformed in the spirit of Jane Seymour, though his regency would eventually give way to later rulers. The course set in those early years bore her imprint. The young king, educated in the tenets of Protestant faith and the rules of just governance, carried himself with a humility that many attributed to his mother's influence. In letters to his tutors, he often expressed a wish to honor my dear late Queen Mother's memory by ruling with mercy and wisdom. Thus, the quiet queen whose life barely brushed 2 decades on the throne became, through her son's reign, a lasting beacon of reform and compassion. When history's pages record the rise of Edward VI and the flowering of Tudor England, they invariably trace back to Jane Seymour's singular act, giving birth to a king. In her gentle sacrifice, the kingdom found both its future and its conscience. Over the span of more than 4 centuries, the life of Jane Seymour has remained a subject of debate among historians. Some ask whether she truly sacrificed herself for the mantle of queen, or whether she was merely a tragic casualty of an unforgiving feudal system. There are those who argue that Jane engaged in careful calculation, leveraging her gentle demeanor and strategic patience to secure her elevation. Others, however, view her with a tender compassion. A young woman pressed to her limits by the relentless demands of childbirth under the unblinking gaze of court and country alike. In one view, Jane's actions appear almost Machiavellian. She navigated the labyrinthine intrigues of the Tudor court with measured intent, aligning herself with power at precisely the moment when Henry's affections shifted. Her refusal of the king's purse and her solemn vow of honor, recounted by Ambassador Chapuis, read like deliberate tests, designed to deepen Henry's fascination and commitment. From this perspective, Jane emerges as an architect of her own destiny, skillfully forging alliances and reinforcing her favor in the most perilous environment a woman could face. Yet an equally compelling argument honors Jane as a victim, an emblem of the perilous intersection between motherhood and monarchy. Consider the brutal circumstance of her labor: 2 days and 3 nights of agonizing travail, followed by a sudden descent into illness that her physicians could scarcely treat. Behind the regal finery and courteous smiles lay a queen susceptible to the same mortal frailties as any other woman. The rumors of forced surgery or hysteria-driven gossip serve as reminders that, in the Tudor era, childbirth could swiftly become a sentence of death, and that those who bore the kingdom's future could be sacrificed at its altar. Today, when we look back on Jane Seymour's story, we see in her the dual facets of Tudor womanhood, the soft grace of compassion intertwined with the keen edge of survival. She embodied an ideal of feminine virtue, piety, obedience, and self-sacrifice. Yet beneath that calm exterior lay a mind capable of shrewd adaptation. Her legacy invites us to ponder the true meaning of agency. Was Jane the humble servant who accepted her role, or a calculating figure who shaped her fate? Her tale also raises broader questions about the value of life, the gendered expectations thrust upon queens, and the enduring dynamics of power in history. Jane's brief reign underscores how societies prize certain attributes: fertility, purity, loyalty, while often overlooking the human cost exacted upon those who embody them. Her memory compels us to examine how gender roles have evolved from the handmaidens of medieval courts to the leaders of modern nations. women's power remains tethered to changing norms and enduring prejudices. In our own era, Jane Seymour's story offers lessons in resilience and empathy. We might reflect on the pressures that individuals, especially women, face when called upon to fulfill duties larger than themselves. Jane's quiet courage amid turmoil suggests the importance of inner strength when external resources are scant. Her willingness to draw upon faith, familial support, and personal resolve provides a blueprint for confronting challenges with dignity and determination. At the same time, we must not romanticize her suffering. The fact that Jane's life was measured in years rather than decades reminds us of the fragility of health and the urgency of medical progress. Modern readers, accustomed to advanced obstetrics and social safety nets, can hardly fathom the hazards Jane endured. By acknowledging the human toll of her era, we sharpen our gratitude for the strides in healthcare and women's autonomy achieved since her time. Jane Seymour's story also speaks to the interplay between public image and private reality. Her serene countenance, so carefully preserved in portraiture and song, belies the depth of her personal trials. In an age of social media and instant scrutiny, her example encourages a measure of compassion. Behind every public persona lies a complex individual shaped by hopes, fears, and sacrifices. Ultimately, Jane's fleeting yet unforgettable chapter in Tudor history reminds us that legacy is woven from both action and perception. Her life prompts us to ask, how will our own choices be remembered? Which virtues will outlive us? And which struggles will be forgotten? In pondering Jane Seymour's journey from a modest lady in waiting to the mother of a king, and finally to an emblem of Tudor endurance, we discover enduring themes of ambition, vulnerability, and the quest for meaning in a world defined by power. As the centuries roll on, let us carry forward the memory of Jane Seymour, not merely as a casualty of dynastic drama, but as a woman whose strength, compassion, and intelligence left an indelible mark on her century and on ours. In her story of light and shadow, of triumph and tragedy, we find echoes of our own struggles, and the timeless hope that even the briefest life can cast a long and lasting glow. After Jane's death, Henry VIII felt a loss that reached far beyond mere courtly etiquette. His robust vigour, once exemplified by vigorous hunts and martial pageantry, began to wane. The king's frame softened as he turned increasingly to rich foods, roasts dripping with fat, spiced pies, sweetmeats glazed in sugar to fill both his body and the emptiness left in his heart. Within months, Henry gained weight at an alarming rate. His once strapping limbs grew heavy, his gait slower, as if each step carried the weight not only of his expanding girth, but also of profound sorrow. Physicians of the time, limited by their rudimentary understanding, prescribed opulent banquets to restore his nervous humours, inadvertently fueling his decline. In the quiet hours of night, Henry tossed in silken sheets, troubled by dreams of Jane's pale face, her gentle smile fading into the shadows. The king's sleep fractured, stitching itself with memories of candlelit vigils and whispered prayers beside her deathbed. This haunting grief spurred a cascade of physical ailments. Gout flared in his swollen joints, a firecracker of pain in his big toes. Feverish sweats rang alarm bells for early diabetes, though they lacked the epithets we apply today. For 2 years following the Queen's passing, Henry remained in an unofficial state of mourning. The Black Years, some courtiers mused in hushed tones, for never had the palace seen such a protracted period of royal bereavement. The king withdrew from public audiences, seldom presiding over council meetings, and he avoided the glittering spectacles of tournaments and masks. Instead, he lingered in private chambers, cradling letters he had penned to Jane and revisiting her locket's broken chain. With the sovereign's absence from daily governance, Thomas Cromwell, formerly the king's chief minister and architect of the English Reformation, found an open field upon which to consolidate his influence. Cromwell's bureaucratic machine hummed smoothly, implementing administrative reforms and smoothing over religious upheavals with pragmatic efficiency. Accounts of the period describe council meetings held without the king's impatient interruptions, allowing debates on land enclosures, poor relief, and ecclesiastical policy to proceed with an almost scholarly deliberation. Henry's withdrawal, while lamentably, inadvertently granted Cromwell's vision of a more systematic state, the breathing room it needed, emotionally. Henry's behaviour during these years surprised many, known throughout Europe as capricious, quick to anger, and eager for conflict. He now displayed a vulnerability previously unseen. Gentle tears fell from his eyes when reminded of Jane's memory. He spoke softly of her devotion and faith. Ambassadors reported that the king's oratory, once brimming with boasts of conquest and divine right now, carried a hushed reverence for mercy and remembrance. For the first time, Henry seemed susceptible to the gentler virtues Jane had championed: patience, empathy, and a quiet reverence for life. The depth of his grief also manifested in his cautious approach to remarriage. Where once Henry had wed within months, indeed, days of a queen's death, he now lingered in the interregnum. 2 full years elapsed before he set eyes upon Anne of Cleves, the fourth wife, whom he wed in 1539. This delay, longer than any previous interval between marriages, spoke volumes. It suggested that Henry had not merely sought another consort to secure alliances or produce heirs, but had paused to honour Jane's memory, to trust that time might soften the sting of her loss. During this period, Henry's court offered a delicate balance between mourning and statecraft. Festivities marked the birth of nobles' children, yet they were always tempered by sombre reflections on mortality. Dinner tables glowed with candelabras and the aroma of spiced mutton, but beneath each ornate centerpiece lay a small black ribbon, an emblem of the king's enduring sorrow. Gentle whispers circulated among servants, "God grant him peace." They prayed, for he has known the fragile sweetness of matrimony most deeply. Some historians view these 2 years as the moment Henry matured in the crucible of human frailty, no longer solely driven by lust or ambition. The king now understood the toll of power on the human spirit. His courtly romances, once rapid and turbulent, gave way to longer seasons of reflection, even when he eventually married Anne of Cleves. The match, though later annulled, was chosen in part for political stability, echoing Jane's own commitment to dynastic continuity. In the autumn of 1539, when Henry finally ventured to new matrimonial territory, his heart carried the echo of Jane's gentle laughter and unwavering resolve. Though subsequent queens rose and fell, none would bridge the chasm left by Jane's passing. To many at court, Henry's hesitancy and measured remarrying felt like a final tribute, a king's last act of devotion to a queen whose soft strength had reshaped him forever. Thus, in the wake of Jane Seymour's death, Henry VIII found himself transformed. The fiery monarch gave way to a more contemplative sovereign, his body softened by grief, and his spirit tempered by compassion. For 2 black years, the palace stood between mourning and renewal, shaped by the memory of a queen who, in her brief reign, had taught a ruthless king the meaning of gentle sorrow. Although Jane did not live to see her son mature into kingship, her legacy endured through the policies and personnel of the Tudor administration. Upon Edward VI's succession in 1547, Jane's own brother, Edward Seymour, now Duke of Somerset, rose swiftly to the position of Lord Protector. In his regency, Somerset built upon the foundations Jane had unwittingly laid, steering the realm toward a more pronounced Protestant orientation. Under his guidance, the Church of England advanced from cautious independence from Rome to a clearer doctrinal identity, with English liturgy, simplified vestments, and sermons that echoed the piety Jane had championed during her brief reign. Somerset also established a courtly model that he called the Queen's Council, a body meant to reflect the moral compass Jane personified. Though she had never formally presided over such a council, her gentle sense of justice and her dedication to mercy became its guiding principles. Councillors took their cues from Jane's remembered demeanour, valuing righteous governance over ruthless ambition. In this way, the Queen's name remained central to governance, even as her body rested quietly beneath Windsor's stones. The Tudor imperative of producing male heirs, so sharply imprinted on Jane's own story, prompted incremental improvements in court medical practice. Physicians of the royal household, learning from the Queen's fate, began to refine their care of expectant mothers. They paid closer attention to nutritional diets, incorporating broths enriched with barley and almond to bolster a mother's strength. They placed greater emphasis on hygiene, scrubbing delivery chambers and instruments with vinegar solutions primitive by modern standards, yet a notable advance for their time. While these measures fell far short of today's obstetric protocols, they marked a tentative recognition that childbirth, even for a queen, demanded specialized knowledge and compassion. These early reforms, born of Jane's tragic passing, found their way into court manuals and little-used compendiums of medical law. The household's nursemaids and apothecaries recorded Jane's symptoms and treatments in leather-bound registers, hoping future women might benefit. In letters to foreign ambassadors, Somerset casually noted the enhanced welfare of the Queen's lying-in, acknowledging the need for vigilant care. Such efforts, modest though they were, signalled a shift. The health of royal women would no longer be left entirely to chance or age-old superstition. Beyond the palace walls, Jane's example trickled into the lives of noble families. Gentlewomen in county households demanded better diets and cleaner birthing rooms, invoking the Queen's memory as justification. They quoted passages from books gifted by Jane, books on midwifery and devotion, as they petitioned local surgeons for more attentive treatment. Even in remote villages, where word of court improvements travelled slowly, parish midwives began to adopt new practices, rinsing linens in boiled water and offering women sips of warm mead diluted with honey and curative herbs. In the broader sweep of history, these tortilla-like steps towards safer childbirth laid the groundwork for later, more systematic medical advances. Midwives, known as Queen's Sisters, emerged in subsequent reigns, a tradition in spirit, if not in formal institution, carrying forward the principle that motherhood deserved dedicated expertise. Jane Seymour's brief, bright tenure as Queen had thus sown seeds in the garden of royal care, seeds that would germinate over decades into a cautious, if halting, recognition of women's bodily needs. Somerset's regency, too, bore the imprint of Jane's influence. He placed men of moderate temperament in key offices, men reputed for temperance and fair dealing rather than flamboyant ambition. The Lord Chancellor, the Lord Privy Seal, and even deputy lieutenants in the shires were chosen with an eye to character. In their actions and decrees, they echoed the Queen's remembered injunctions: uphold justice, show mercy, and govern with humility before God. Ever after, officials swore oaths that bore Jane's name, pledging to honour the memory of our late Queen in all our duties. Even as Edward VI grew to adolescence, his tutors emphasised the virtues of piety and gentleness, qualities associated with his mother. Historical accounts record that the young king commended the poor and visited infirmaries, actions attributed to the noble blood Jane had passed to him. Though Edward's reign would be shadowed by political strife and his own fragile health, the period immediately following his accession shone with the reflection of a queen's unseen hand. As the years passed and Jane's portrait in the royal collection gathered layers of patina, her story remained a silent testament to the intertwining of mercy and rule. The queen who died giving life became, in memory, the patroness of those who would later wear white veils as crown-like honours. In the annals of Tudor medicine and governance, Her influence persisted a whisper in council chambers, a gentle pulse in the kingdom's religious heartbeat, and a hope that the lessons drawn from her sacrifice would guide queens and mothers for generations to come. The meteoric rise and equally swift passing of Jane Seymour laid bare the Tudor court's profound ambivalence toward women. On one hand, the feudal monarchy exalted the female body's power to perpetuate the dynasty, lavishing queens with admiration and privilege the moment they bore a son. On the other hand, that very gift childbearing rendered them perilously exposed, subject to the harshest whims of politics and biology alike. Jane's short tenure as queen encapsulated this contradiction, celebrated for giving life, yet sacrificed to the relentless demands of an unforgiving court, yet beyond the tragedy of her fate. Jane bequeathed a subtler legacy of soft power in an environment dominated by swords, proclamations, and forceful decrees. She demonstrated that a woman armed with virtue, intelligence, and adaptability could attain influence of equal, if not greater, magnitude. Jane's gentle demeanor was her shield, her strategic patience. By mastering the art of courtly service, knowing when to speak, when to remain silent, she carved a place for herself in the annals of power, without resorting to open confrontation. In the wake of her passing, the inner workings of the royal household underwent a transformation. The ladies-in-waiting, who once navigated the capricious tides of favor with whispered schemes and overheard secrets, found themselves subject to a new code of conduct. Jane's example prompted stricter regulations, no more clandestine whispers in shadowed corridors, no more trysts that might ignite scandal. Instead, each attendant was required to maintain impeccable decorum, to focus on piety and service rather than personal ambition. Under this regimen, the late Queen's name became synonymous with integrity every action, from curtsied greeting to folded hands in prayer, held the implicit echo of her gentle rule. Consequently, the court's grand halls took on a more structured character. Public disputes, once commonplace among rival ladies, vying for the king's attention, diminished markedly. Instead of open brawls or overt showmanship, influence was exercised in quiet counsel and composed gestures. Attendants learned to express loyalty through dutiful attendance at chapel services, meticulous adherence to ceremonial protocol, and thoughtful execution of household tasks. By elevating such everyday acts into rites of royal grace, the court's social fabric gained a disciplined cohesion. Of course, the essence of power did not vanish behind these polished facades. Beneath the velvet gowns and measured smiles, intrigue still thrived. Ambition retreated into subtler corridors, letters exchanged in cipher, alliances woven in whispered confidences, small favors granted in the flicker of candlelight. Yet even these clandestine maneuvers were tempered by the expectation of Jane's unwitting decree that they remain discreet, hidden from prying eyes. This shift from brazen rivalry to covert strategy exemplified Jane's enduring influence, a queen who was never overtly combative, yet whose spirit continued to shape the court's rules long after her death. In time, the discipline she inspired became enshrined as part of the Tudor court's identity. New recruits learned of the Seymour Standard, a phrase whispered in training chambers that described the balance of humility and determination Jane had embodied. They were taught that a woman's power need not manifest in loud proclamations but could emerge from consistent fidelity to duty and the cultivation of quiet respect. This paradigm gradually spread to other courts in Europe. As foreign dignitaries observed the relative calm of Henry's household and sought to emulate its order beyond ceremonial reforms, Jane's soft power resonated in the very conduct of governance. When her brother, the Protector Somerset, convened meetings of the Queen's Council, he did so with an emphasis on decorum and moral purpose, values he attributed to his sister's memory. Policies were debated with an eye toward justice and mercy, rather than pure expedience. The reverberations of Jane's ethic thus reached into the kingdom's highest deliberations, guiding decisions on everything from poor relief to ecclesiastical appointments. Yet for all these lasting changes, it is Jane's personal example that shines most brightly. In a realm governed by iron fist and gilded scepter, she wielded a power as soft as silk, yet as potent as steel. Her life, though fleeting, taught a lesson that transcended her era, that true influence stems not from dominion over others, but from mastery of one's own character. In the hush of candlelit vigils and the whispers of the Queen's Council alike, her gentle legacy endured a testament to the quiet strength of virtue and the enduring force of adaptability in a world built on conquest and control. Over the rolling centuries, Jane Seymour's life has unfolded again and again across the pages of historical novels, the frames of television dramas, and the stages of theatrical productions. In Philippa Gregory's novel, The White Queen, Jane emerges in gentle hues of compassion and quiet courage. Gregory paints her as a woman of soft strength, her kindness tucked like a secret beneath courtiers' glancing whispers, her intelligence concealed behind a serene smile. In this retelling, the future queen navigates the shadowed corridors of power with an almost invisible cunning, reminding readers that silent resolve can be as formidable as any public display. Meanwhile, Tudor chroniclers such as Raphael Holinshed captured Jane's contributions in their famed annals. In Holinshed's chronicles, her role in producing a male heir receives solemn praise. Noted as a singular act that steadied the future of England's throne, Holinshed describes her unwavering loyalty, how she remained steadfast in service to crown and country, even as intrigue swirled around her. His account, dry in its prose, yet rich in detail, laid the groundwork for later storytellers to interpret Jane's devotion as both duty and destiny. Beyond words, painters of the late Tudor and Stuart periods sought to freeze Jane's essence in pigment and canvas. They often portrayed her in gowns of purest white, a colour emblematic of innocence and sacrifice. Her figure would emerge luminous against a backdrop of burnished gold, a visual marriage of purity and regal splendour. The contrast between her gentle visage and the radiant field behind her whispered of holiness, as though she were an earthly saint, draped in royal finery. Viewers gazed upon these images and found in Jane the embodiment of selfless grace, a counterpoint to the more martial and worldly depictions of her royal sisters. In Westminster Abbey, a memorial brass set into the floor near the high altar bears her name and coat of arms. Though simple in design, the inscription honours her as the Queen of Peace, inviting pilgrims to pause and recall her brief yet luminous tenure. Nearby, a statue, a delicate rendering in white marble, shows Jane with her hands folded in prayer, her head slightly bowed. Soft candlelight plays across the folds of her sculpted robes, creating an almost living warmth that draws the faithful into hours of quiet reflection. Each visitor who kneels before the image carries away a sense of calm, as though Jane's spirit still watches over the Abbey's sacred hush. In Bath Abbey, the coloured glass windows tell another facet of her story, drenched in pale blues and soft ambers. The panes depict scenes from her life: the bridal procession at Whitehall, the gentle moment of her kneeling before the king's envoy, and the tender lullaby sung to her newborn son. Above these panels, a larger portrait window shows her crowned with lilies, a symbol of purity and renewal. When morning light streams through, the abbey floor becomes a tapestry of shifting colour, each hue a whisper of Jane's enduring legacy. On stage, playwrights have woven her tale into dramas, both intimate and grand. Some scripts highlight Jane's quieter moments, her late-night vigils at the king's side, the fleeting joy in her eyes when she held her infant son. Other works explore the tension between her gentle nature and the cruel politics of the court, building scenes where Jane's soft voice carries the weight of unspoken strategies. Actors slip into her skin, discovering how to convey power through the subtlest gesture, a lifted eyebrow, a measured silence mirroring the soft authority Jane wielded. On television, series set in the Tudor era often draw on these layered portrayals. Costumers drape their actresses in linen shifts and silk gowns of ecru and dove grey, then cloak them in ceremonial robes of ivory, trimmed with ermine. In candlelit chambers, the camera lingers on each folded hand, each hesitant bow, as if searching for the quiet courage that underpinned Jane's strength. Viewers at home come to understand that a queen need not shout her power. She may rather breathe it softly into the world around her. Even in Putri, Jane's memory resonates. Verses borrowed from the king's tranquil ballad, its refrain still chanted in hushed recital, speak of her calm resolve, soft as dawn, steadfast as steel, the queen whose grace our hearts could feel. These lines, carried on the wind of centuries, find their way onto crumbling parchment and polished volumes alike, reminding readers that Jane's virtue was both gentleness and metal entwined. Thus, through novel, chronicle, painting, statue, window, stage, and screen, Jane Seymour's image endures. In each form, she is the Pacific Queen, a balm of compassion in a court shaped by intrigue and conflict. Her story, reborn in art and literature, continues to invite us into a world where quiet strength commands as much awe as royal decree. And so, in the candlelit gloom or the silent hush of dawn, Jane's memory comes alive, a soft light guiding us toward the softer edges of power. And that is the story of Jane Seymour, a queen as delicate as morning mist, yet possessing a hidden strength capable of altering the course of history. Through her brief journey, we learn that power is not measured solely by the sword or promises of glory, but also by virtue, wisdom, and adaptability. Jane taught us a precious lesson in any circumstance. Patience and humility can open doors that seem forever closed. From her early shy days in the royal household to her moment of triumph in glory and, finally, her hurried departure from this world, Jane Seymour always remained the image of a humble yet resolute woman. She never rallied with slogans or waved her arms in command. Instead, she chose to lead by example, demonstrating kindness, honesty, and wholehearted dedication to her duties. That is true soft power, a kind of strength anyone can learn and apply, whether within a family,